Ukraine and Russia are exchanging fire on multiple fronts. Bridges are being destroyed, cities are burning, and oil depots are under attack.
All right, in other news, Russia has conducted fresh strikes on Ukraine's Zaporizhia region. Ukraine says Russian forces carried out 567 attacks over the last 24 hours.
At least 7 people were injured in a missile strike, while 2 others were hospitalized, and 23 private homes, 12 apartment buildings, and a post office suffered damage.
At 4:30 a.m., more than 80 drones rose from hidden fields and launched a strike designed to erase nearly 180 miles of Russian radar coverage in just 6 minutes. But here's the question. How do you stop a missile barrage when your eyes and ears are already blinded? This wasn't just an attack. It was intended to reset the entire front line in one move. Stay with us, because once you see what Ukraine did next, you'll realize how fast a battlefield can be transformed when the electromagnetic spectrum itself is turned into a weapon. How can 80 drones, rockets, and cruise missiles work together to erase 180 miles of defenses in less than 6 minutes? That's not a theoretical challenge. It's exactly what unfolded in the early morning darkness when Ukraine launched a synchronized strike aimed at cutting the nerve system of Russian air defenses before any missile could even leave its launcher. The goal was simple: blind the radar, shatter the response network, and open a corridor straight through one of the most fortified borders in Europe.
Biggest Russian drone and missile attack of the war. Ukraine says Moscow fired 550 drones and 11 missiles overnight.
To Russia launching a massive aerial assault against Ukraine, the biggest since the invasion more than 3 years ago.
Rescue workers say 1 person died and 26 were injured.
Pulling that off against a state armed with multiple overlapping layers of defense looked close to impossible. But the timeline of those 6 minutes tells a different story. The strike began at dawn, with the first wave carefully coordinated to overwhelm different parts of the Russian detection grid. Imagine dozens of unmanned aircraft rising at once, engines buzzing low over the fields, their routes staggered but calculated to arrive together over the radar horizon. It wasn't chaos. It was a moving puzzle where each piece locked in with ruthless precision.
And Ukraine has destroyed Russian strategic bombers in a mass drone attack on airfields deep inside Moscow's territory. The operation, carried out by Ukraine's security service, targeted 4 airfields in what could be the most damaging drone strike. Drones also targeted the Ivanovo air base northeast of Moscow and Diaghilevo base south of the capital. Russia moved its expensive bombers thousands of miles from the front lines to get them out of range of Ukraine's drones.
By the time the first missile arced across the sky, the drones were already filling Russian screens with noise. Jammed imagery, irregular flight paths, and sheer saturation cluttered the operators' displays, leaving barely enough time to tell real targets from illusions. The scale of that launch looked like a storm front lifting out of the ground.
Attacks simultaneously against 5 military bases across the country with a distance of over 4,000 kilometers between the targets. Absolutely unexpected. I think, looking at the number of smokes, it is true. Russia has lost a huge part of its strategic fleet. We have seen the Tupolev 95 bombers burning. They burning. Ukrainians say that they have destroyed or damaged 40 strategic bombers, even if a part of this number is true. And
80 aircraft airborne in waves, dispersing into different flight corridors, some hugging the tree line, some climbing higher to pull radar beams upward and away from the real threats. It was the kind of swarm pattern designed not just to test an air defense, but to fracture it. And while Russian crews scrambled to ready interceptors, another element was already in motion. Long-range cruise missiles threading between hills, skimming river valleys, and hunting specific nodes in the chain. Each target mattered because each hit created another torn seam in the coverage net. Among these, the Storm Shadow cruise missiles played the leading role. Built for precision strikes, they didn't race in on straight lines. They hugged terrain, slid through low altitudes, and approached radar hubs from angles designed to minimize exposure. Within moments, 2 of these critical stations went silent. The effect was larger than just losing a set of screens. It left entire batteries of surface-to-air missiles firing blind, unable to distinguish decoys from genuine incoming threats. Russian officers in bunker command posts tried to reroute information, but backup feeds were already compromised, turning what should have been a seamless defense grid into isolated pockets of reaction. At the same moment, Russian artillery and thermobaric launchers stood ready to respond. But readiness meant little without guidance. With blank screens and scrambled signals, they fired sporadically, saturating empty fields or trailing contrails into open sky. Every wasted round bought Ukraine more time. When crews on the ground realized that salvos meant to tear through aircraft formations weren't hitting anything, confusion tightened. Orders bogged down in transmission delays. Batteries that should have blanketed the air with interceptors hesitated, waiting for verification that never came. On top of this, the strike folded in long-range ATACMS aimed at hardened silos. Facilities intended to host retaliatory salvos found themselves battered before they could open their doors. Explosion after explosion forced not only damage control, but also command to relocate. With radar blind and launch sites compromised, the central coordination Russia relied on was cut from beneath them. Even commanders with working equipment couldn't link their responses to the broader system. Action turned piecemeal, buying Ukraine further openings across the front. This is when electronic warfare units added their weight. They weren't just jamming random frequencies. They bent launch codes, cut handoff signals, and severed communication threads between missile crews and command centers. Radios buzzed with useless chatter. Launch attempts stalled mid-process. Missiles that should have torn across the border never even left their rails. For soldiers trained to act with timing and certainty, the feeling of paralysis spread faster than any direct strike could have achieved. In a matter of minutes, the result was no longer theoretical. Radar sweeps flattened. Missile bays cracked open but never fired. Batteries once considered impenetrable hung idle above smoldering bunkers. What Ukraine carved was a 30-mile corridor into the Kursk flank, a gap that transformed a wall of defense into open ground. Once the hole appeared, nothing about the impenetrable grid looked untouchable anymore. That raises the harder question: if one of the most elaborate radar nets in the world can be disabled nearly instantly, what does that mean for the very idea of air defense in 21st century war? This strike wasn't just about knocking out radar stations or silencing artillery. It signaled a shift in how battles are decided when the electromagnetic spectrum itself becomes the battlefield. No fortress of steel or concrete matters if the signals guiding it are cut, scrambled, or replaced. That's the new reality of modern war. And it leaves the question for you: if a network this fortified can be dismantled in minutes, what does that mean for the safety of any border, any city, anywhere? One dawn attack didn't only open a corridor, it flipped the balance of an entire front line.